On the surface, Emily and David Matthews lived the kind of life people envied. Their two-story colonial home in a quiet New Jersey suburb looked like something out of a magazine. White shutters framed the windows. The lawn was always freshly cut. And the neighbors often commented on how perfect they seemed as a couple. Emily, in her early 30s, carried herself with the grace of someone who had her life in order. David, a hard-working accountant, provided stability and security. Together, they seemed unshakable. But behind the neatly painted front door, cracks were forming in their marriage. Subtle at first, then more noticeable with each passing month. Emily felt the weight of routine pressing on her chest. Every day was the same. Wake up, prepare breakfast, kiss David goodbye, and spend the rest of the day drifting through chores, errands, and the hollow silence of an empty house. She loved her husband. At least, she thought she did. But passion had long faded. Their conversations had grown mechanical, revolving around bills, schedules, and minor inconveniences. At night, David often fell asleep with his laptop still open beside him, while Emily stared at the ceiling, wondering if this was all life had to offer. It was during one of her rare escapes into the city that temptation first appeared. A friend had convinced her to join for a Friday evening cocktail hour downtown. Emily hadn't dressed up in months, and the mirror almost startled her when she saw herself in a black dress that hugged her figure in ways she had nearly forgotten. For a few hours, she didn't feel like the bored housewife of Maplewood. She felt alive, and that was when she met Ryan. He wasn't anything like David. Where her husband was steady and predictable, Ryan was magnetic, quick with his words and unafraid to hold her gaze. He was a marketing executive in his mid-30s, confident in his charm, the kind of man who could make a crowded room shrink down to just the two of them. They talked, laughed, and exchanged numbers, though Emily told herself she would never actually use it. That night, as she returned home to the quiet suburbs, she lay in bed beside her sleeping husband, staring at the glow of her phone screen where Ryan's name now lived in her contacts. She told herself it was harmless, just a name, just a reminder of how it felt to be noticed again. But deep down, Emily already knew something had been set in motion. The following week, Emily tried to forget Ryan. She buried herself in routine, grocery shopping, tidying the house, scrolling through social media to pass the long afternoons. But his face lingered in her thoughts like an echo she couldn't silence. Every time she folded David's shirts or cooked another bland dinner, she remembered Ryan's smile, the way his hand had brushed hers when he leaned in to make a joke. By Thursday, the temptation became unbearable. She found herself opening her phone, scrolling to his name, hesitating, then locking the screen again. Hours passed. Finally, with her heart pounding, she typed a simple message. "Hey, it's Emily," from last Friday. She hit send before she could change her mind. The reply came within minutes. "I was hoping you'd reach out." Her stomach flipped. The conversation flowed easily from there, at first light and playful, then gradually dipping into something heavier. Ryan asked about her life, her marriage. Emily admitted she felt stuck, though she carefully avoided details. He didn't pry, but his replies carried an undertone of understanding, as though he had already guessed a rest. That weekend, when David was called into the office for an unexpected audit, Ryan invited her to meet for coffee. Emily told herself it was harmless, just two people catching up. She wore a casual blouse and jeans, nothing too suggestive, but she still applied lipstick, something she hadn't done in months. The moment she walked into the cafe, Ryan's eyes lit up. He stood to greet her, pulling out her chair with the kind of attention David had long forgotten to give. They talked for nearly 2 hours, sipping lattes that grew cold as the conversation drifted from careers to dreams, from regrets to secret desires. When Emily finally checked the time, she panicked. She had promised David she'd be home before dinner. She gathered her things quickly, thanking Ryan for the afternoon. But as she turned to leave, he gently touched her wrist. "Emily," he said softly, "I don't want this to end here." Her breath caught. For a moment, she wanted to lean into him, to let herself be swept away. But fear and guilt dragged her back. She forced a smile, whispered goodbye, and hurried out into the chilly evening air. That night, David noticed nothing unusual. He was exhausted, talking about numbers and deadlines, barely lifting his eyes from the screen. Emily listened, nodding where appropriate. But her thoughts were elsewhere, on Ryan's hand, his voice, and the dangerous thrill she felt each time her phone buzzed with a new message from him. She knew she was standing at the edge of something irreversible. The line between fantasy and betrayal was blurring, and she wasn't sure she wanted to step back. The following days were a storm inside Emily's chest. Every morning, she woke beside David, pretending nothing had changed, but each vibration of her phone pulled her deeper into Ryan's orbit. Their messages grew longer, more intimate. He complimented her laugh, the way her mind worked, even the smallest details she had forgotten anyone could notice. With every word, Emily felt more alive. One Tuesday afternoon, Ryan suggested they meet again, this time not in a cafe, but in the city. Emily hesitated, staring at the blinking cursor on her screen. She knew what he was asking without him spelling it out. A part of her wanted to delete the message, to retreat into the safety of routine. But another part, the restless, hungry part, typed yes. That Friday, she told David she was visiting her college friend in Manhattan. He barely looked up from his laptop, simply kissing her cheek and telling her to have fun. The casualness of it stung more than she expected. She took the train into the city, her hands trembling as the skyline came into view. Ryan was waiting outside a boutique hotel near Soho, his confidence steady, his smile disarming. He greeted her with a hug that lingered just a moment too long, and in that instant, Emily knew the decision had already been made. They walked together through the bustling streets, grabbing a drink at a rooftop bar. The city lights twinkled around them, but Emily barely noticed. Her entire world narrowed down to the man sitting across from her. Their knees brushed beneath the table. His hand covered hers. When he leaned in, she didn't pull away. Their kiss was electric, igniting a part of her that had been asleep for years. Guilt flared instantly, but it was drowned out by desire. Later, in the quiet privacy of the hotel room, Emily crossed a line she once swore she never would. Every stolen touch, every whispered word, every gasp felt like a rebellion against the life she had built in the suburbs. She knew she was betraying David, but at that moment, she couldn't bring herself to care. Hours later, as she lay tangled in white sheets beside Ryan, reality began to creep back in. She thought about David's steady breathing at night, the safety of their marriage, the trust she had just shattered. A wave of guilt washed over her, heavy and suffocating. But when Ryan brushed a strand of hair from her face and whispered, "You deserve to feel alive," Emily believed him. And that belief would become the dangerous excuse she clung to. The weeks that followed were a blur of lies and secret meetings. By day, Emily remained the perfect suburban wife, running errands, attending neighborhood gatherings, smiling politely when people commented on how lucky she was to have a husband like David. But by night, or whenever she could slip away, she was someone else entirely. Her phone became her most dangerous possession. She turned off notifications, deleted messages, and sometimes even changed Ryan's name in her contacts to disguise him as a female co-worker. Still, the thrill of their conversations was worth the risk. Each buzz of her phone sent her heart racing, not with fear, but with anticipation. Ryan was relentless in his pursuit. He sent her flowers under the guise of a book club friend, took her out to dimly lit restaurants in the city, and whispered promises of adventures far beyond Maplewood. Emily knew it was reckless, but the excitement was intoxicating. For the first time in years, she felt wanted, desired, alive. David, meanwhile, remained blind to it all. His job consumed him, long hours spent buried in spreadsheets and conference calls. He often came home too tired for conversation, collapsing on the couch while Emily's mind drifted elsewhere. His indifference gave her freedom, but living a double life came with cracks. One evening, David casually asked, "You've been going into the city a lot lately. What's keeping you so busy?" Emily froze. Her fork hovered over her plate, her pulse quickening. She forced a smile. "Oh, just catching up with friends. Try not to lose touch." David nodded absently, returning to his food. The relief that washed over her was immense, but it also carried a warning. The walls were closing in. One night, After another stolen evening with Ryan, Emily returned home to find David asleep in the armchair, his glasses sliding down his nose. She stood there for a long moment, staring at him. Guilt clawed at her chest. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't unfaithful. He was just ordinary. And maybe that was his greatest crime. Lying in bed beside him, she whispered into the dark, almost to herself, "What am I doing?" But when her phone lit up on the nightstand, Ryan's name glowing like a beacon, she already knew the answer. She wasn't ready to stop. By autumn, Emily's world had become a careful balancing act. She had grown skilled at hiding her affair, mastering the art of excuses, covering her tracks with practiced ease. But with every secret trip into the city, every lie told with a steady voice, the cracks in her facade widened. Ryan was no longer satisfied with brief encounters in hotel rooms. He wanted more. He talked about trips they could take together, places they could escape to, even a life beyond Maplewood. Sometimes his words thrilled her, but other times they terrified her. Was this still a game, or was it something more? At home, David began noticing small changes. He wasn't suspicious yet, but there were questions. Why did Emily spend so much time getting ready before meeting friends? Why did she come home so late, looking flustered and glowing in a way she hadn't in years? One night, he reached for her in bed, trying to bridge the distance that had grown between them, but she gently pushed him away, mumbling that she was tired. The rejection stung. David didn't say anything, but his silence weighed on her heavier than words could. One Saturday morning, while Emily was in the shower, David walked past her phone, buzzing on the nightstand. The screen flashed with a text, "Can't stop thinking about last night." His brow furrowed. But before he could pick it up, Emily rushed out, a towel wrapped tightly around her, snatching the phone before he had the chance. Her laughter was too forced. "It's just a girlfriend joking around," she said, avoiding his eyes. David let it go, but suspicion had taken root. That same evening, Emily met Ryan again. The city lights blurred past the cab window as she leaned against him, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She couldn't shake the image of David's face, that quiet confusion when he saw the message. For the first time, the thrill of the affair was laced with fear. "Are you okay?" Ryan asked, brushing his hand against hers. "I'm fine," she lied, forcing a smile. But deep down, she knew her perfect disguise was slipping. As she returned home later that night, Emily crept into the house, the familiar creak of the floorboards echoing louder than ever. David was awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, his eyes fixed on her. "You're late," he said simply. The room felt colder than the autumn air outside. Emily swallowed hard, her carefully constructed world beginning to tremble. And for the first time, she realized the truth wasn't going to stay hidden forever. David wasn't a man easily given to drama, but the unease gnawed at him like a dull blade. He told himself he trusted Emily, that she was loyal, that their marriage was solid. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew with every unexplained absence, every nervous smile she gave when he asked simple questions. The following week, David began to watch more closely. He noticed how quickly she grabbed her phone whenever it buzzed, how she stepped outside to take calls, lowering her voice to a near whisper. He noticed how often her book club meetings or lunches with friends conveniently aligned with the nights she came home glowing and restless. One evening, while Emily was showering, David finally gave in to the suspicion. He unlocked her phone, a guilty weight pressing on his chest. The screen was clean, no messages, no suspicious calls, nothing out of place. Too clean, almost as if someone had been erasing every trace. When Emily came out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around her, she caught him holding the phone. For a split second, her face betrayed her, a flash of panic before she forced a smile. "What are you doing?" she asked lightly. "Just checking the time," David said, but his voice was tight. Emily took the phone back, her heart pounding. She managed to laugh it off, but she knew he was starting to see through her. That night, as David lay awake staring at the ceiling, Emily texted Ryan under the covers. "We need to be more careful. He's noticing things." Ryan replied almost instantly, "Then leave him. Be with me. You don't have to live like this." Emily stared at the words until her eyes blurred. Leave him. Could she? David wasn't cruel, wasn't abusive. He was steady, safe. But wasn't that exactly what suffocated her? The next morning, David lingered at the breakfast table, studying her as she poured coffee. His eyes were tired, searching. Emily, he said slowly, is there something you're not telling me? The mug trembled slightly in her hand. She forced herself to meet his gaze, offering a practiced smile. Of course not. Why would you think that? But even as the words left her lips, she knew he didn't believe them. And in that moment, she realized the life she had been so carefully balancing was on the verge of collapse. For days, the house felt like a battlefield. Words were fewer, silences heavier. David's eyes followed Emily everywhere, quiet but piercing, as if he were trying to read the truth from her face. Emily tried to maintain her calm, but every question he asked, where were you? Who were you with? Felt like a step closer to the inevitable. Ryan, on the other hand, was pushing harder than ever. This can't go on forever. You have to choose, he texted late one night, his impatience boiling over. Emily stared at the glowing words, torn between the life she had built and the reckless freedom Ryan promised. But the choice was made for her. One rainy Thursday evening, David came home earlier than expected. Emily was in the kitchen, phone in hand, a smile tugging at her lips as she typed to Ryan. She didn't hear the door open, didn't notice David standing there until he spoke. Who are you texting? The phone nearly slipped from her fingers. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she turned, forcing a laugh. Just a friend. David stepped closer, his voice calm but edged with steel. Emily! Stop lying to me. The room spun. For the first time, she couldn't find the words. Her silence was an answer in itself. David's jaw clenched, his hands trembling at his sides. How long? Tears welled in her eyes, but still she said nothing. The weight of her betrayal filled the room, louder than any confession. God, David whispered, stepping back as though the truth itself had struck him. I trusted you. Emily reached for him, desperate. David, please, it's not what you think. But he pulled away, his face twisted with pain and disbelief. Not what I think. Do you take me for a fool? The rain outside pounded against the windows as the silence stretched between them, broken only by ragged breaths. Emily wanted to explain, to justify the loneliness, the emptiness that had driven her into Ryan's arms. But every excuse died on her lips. Finally, David spoke, his voice low and raw. I don't even know who you are anymore. He walked out of the kitchen, the sound of front door slamming echoing through the house. Emily stood frozen, her phone still buzzing in her hand with another message from Ryan. When can I see you again? For the first time, the thrill was gone. All that remained was fear. The days that followed were a blur of silence and tension. David moved through the house like a ghost, present but unreachable. He no longer asked where Emily was going, no longer kissed her on the cheek before leaving for work. The warmth that had once anchored their marriage was gone, replaced by a cold wall she couldn't climb. Emily tried to reach him. She cooked his favorite meals, asked about his day, even placed her hand gently on his arm at night. But he recoiled, not out of anger, but out of hurt. His silence said more than any shouting ever could. The trust was broken, and nothing she did could mend it. Meanwhile, Ryan grew impatient. His text shifted from sweet to demanding. You said you weren't happy. So leave him. What are you waiting for? His words, once thrilling, now felt suffocating. Each message was a reminder of the choice she had made, a choice that cost the stability of her marriage. One night, Emily sat in her car parked on a quiet street, Ryan's number glowing on her screen. Her finger hovered over the call button, but she couldn't press it. For the first time, she realized Ryan wasn't an escape. He was a storm that had ripped through her life, leaving wreckage behind. When she finally returned home, David was waiting. He sat at the dining table, a manila envelope in front of him, divorce papers. Her chest tightened. David, please, can we talk about this? He looked at her, his eyes hollow. Talk? We've been living in lies. Emily, you didn't just betray me, you destroyed us. Tears blurred her vision. I was lonely. I needed. No, he cut her off, his voice sharp. You needed something I couldn't give. And instead of telling me, you chose him. The finality in his tone was like a knife. Emily sank into the chair, realizing too late that her search for passion had cost her everything. The house, the husband who once adored her, the life she had taken for granted. It was all slipping away as David slid the papers across the table. Emily felt the weight of her choices settle on her shoulders. She wanted to scream, to beg for forgiveness, to turn back time. But deep down, she knew there was no going back. That night, when she lay alone in the bed that once held a marriage, Emily finally understood the truth. Affairs weren't about freedom. They were about destruction. And in chasing the thrill of feeling alive, she had ended up with nothing but silence